Alright, so on today's Speed Duel deck profile, we have one of the newest decks that really is shaking up the meta. It is Serpent Knight Dragon. This deck comes straight out of the Ultimate Predators starter deck. Just picking up 3 of these, you can basically make the deck. There's a couple other additions that you probably want to tuck in, but basically all the structure that the deck is completely there just by picking that up. So start off, we're going to play 3 Serpent Knight Dragons. This is a level 7 dragon type with 2350 attack, 2400 defense. So all around good stats, not really weak in the attack or defense category there. And this deck is basically made for this skill card. It's Nightmare Sonic Blast, like from the show with Rex. And its effect is actually like incredibly good and just really hard to work around for your opponent. So you can activate this skill once per turn as long as you have a Serpent Knight Dragon on the field, and you just reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. And if you have 1 monster, you in those revealed cards, you can add it to your hand. If you get 2 monsters out of those 4, you can destroy an opponent's card, and any card, not just a monster. And if you get 3 or more, you can actually apply both effects. So pretty much the goal of this deck is to play a ton of monsters so that you can always hit that 3 and basically get both effects every single turn just by keeping Serpent Knight Dragon out on the field. So you can also replace all the cards, the ones I guess you didn't add to your hand, on the top of your deck in any order. So that's just a nice bonus. You pretty much we can talk about strategy a little later, but you pretty much want to clear out all of the spell and trap cards so you always have monsters coming up. So next we're going to be playing 3 Black Stego, and this card is actually really good. It's just a level 4 and it has 2000 defense, so it's really good just to set and kind of create a wall between you and your opponent. But its effect is also really good where its attack is kind of weak, but the effect makes up for it, that if you if this card's in attack position and it's targeted for an attack, you can switch it to defense position. So it really makes it hard for your opponent to do damage when you have this guy in the field, whether or not it's an attack or defense. So I think that's just always good to have, but then again, it's just really good to have monsters in this deck. That's really what you want to be drawing on that skill. So next we have Command Knight. And Command Knight's just a really good card in general. It's probably one of the better 4-star monsters out there just because its defense is so strong, kind of similar to Black Stego. But it also gains 400 attack, and any other warrior monsters you have gain 400 attack. So it synergizes really well with warrior decks, but this deck obviously only plays these 3 warriors. So it's going to have 1600 attack on the field, but another great thing about it is that if you happen to draw 2 Command Knights, you can just Command Knight lock them, where if you have 2 Command Knights on the field and no other monsters, its effect is that your opponent cannot target either of them, because if you control another monster, monsters your opponent controls cannot target this card for attacks. So if you have 2, basically each one prevents the other from being targeted. So yeah, it's actually pretty legit, and it gives you some time just to build up if you need to build up like resources, like some traps or anything like that. Because I mean, it's not going to do too much. If you have both on the field, you're going to have 2 2K beaters, but it's not really going to win duels, but it's really going to slow down the pace. I mean, you could always try to have your opponent draw out, but I mean, usually this deck is the one that does draw out if any of them do. So that's one thing you got to be a little bit cautious of. Next, I'm just going to play 3 of the hand traps, the classic staple Spear Karibo. And it's really good for this deck because it slows down, again, your opponent. You kind of want to make sure that your Serpent Knight Dragon stays on the field, or if you have 1 monster that next turn you're hoping to turn into Serpent Knight Dragon, you just want to basically keep that Serpent Knight on the field, so you can always be using your skill every turn. So this one just protects it, where if your opponent happens to get out 1 monster that is just powerful enough to kill Serpent Knight, you can just, again, stall 1 more turn, save it for 1 more turn, and then hopefully next turn you can pop it with your skill, which, I mean, it's usually how it goes, and it's really hard to prevent that skill from going off. There's really no workarounds because it can pop any monster, any trap, whether it's set, face up, it doesn't matter. So you can't use like RFI or anything to save it like you could for like example like a warrior elimination. I mean, there's really not much you can do once that skill goes off. So you really got to be careful with that. So in this deck, in this build, I opt for 3 Tribute Duel, which I think is the better of the two. You can do this one, or you can do I think it's Dragon's Rebirth, which is the trap. Where so the difference is that basically both let you tribute 1 monster to special summon Serpent Knight Dragon. That's how you basically use both. But this one you can do it without waiting a turn, without having to set the trap. But you can't attack for this turn. The Dragon's Rebirth, you can set it for a turn, and then you can just tribute and just basically special summon. So I mean that's really good. But I think this one just kind of is just, you kind of want that speed, I think, in this deck. And I don't know, I can mess around with the Dragon's Rebirth, but I think for now this is definitely what I'm going with. So basically the goal is to have a Serpent Knight Dragon in your hand, any monster, and then this Tribute Duel. And once you have that, you can just set the monster or summon the monster, whichever you want to, and then tribute it. And then you can get out Serpent Knight Dragon and then just use the effect immediately, even though you won't be able to attack. But it really starts to slow down your opponent if like they think that they have built up a really good defense. Just like, if they had like a boss monster on the field or something that like you can't get over with Serpent Knight anyway. I mean, you can just pop it and then next turn go for a direct attack and then, just kind of keep the cycle going. So as long as you have that Serpent Knight on the field, it's just really, really hard for your opponent to get over it. Because I mean, if you just keep it even in just defense mode, once you special summon it out, since you can't attack anyway, 2400 is just a lot to get over. Especially after being 1 card down from your skill. So that's something you definitely just want to keep into consideration. Summoner's Art, I play 2 currently in this deck. I think that's probably the best way to go, because you don't always want this card. You only want it once you don't have a Serpent Knight Dragon in your hand. And that's like playing 3 Serpent Knight Dragons already. I mean, it's a pretty good chance you're going to have one in your hand. Even if it gets popped, by that time you're probably going to have drawn another one. But you really do want to be able to get that in your hand so you can just immediately go off and just get your skill going every turn. So I mean, because like Tribute Duel is definitely the better one, because I mean you have so many monsters. Like I wouldn't take that down to 2. I think that's good at 3. But Summoner's Art, I mean, yeah, you're gonna have you're not gonna want to search out too many Serpent Knight Dragons anyway, because that could potentially be a monster that you reveal in your skill. So if you search them all out of your deck, then you're 3 monsters down already. So you really don't want to be doing that. And then especially if you happen to draw through like 2 or 3 Serpent Knight Dragons, you really don't want to draw Summoner's Art or have that in your deck, because then again it's just another spell card that doesn't help your skill, and then it's just literally a dead card once all your Serpent Knights are either in your hand or on the field. So. And then finally, I think Windstorm is a really good trap card for this deck. You potentially could play Kunai. I think Windstorm's really good because if your opponent happens to get out like 1 or 2 monsters that are really starting to get like a little scary, you can just stop their whole field and save your Serpent Knight Dragon, because there's really no outs in this deck other than just Windstorm and Sphere Karibo. So being able to turn multiple monsters into defense position is really good. And then you're just going to have to kind of just attack with Serpent Knight Dragon. That's the whole goal of this deck, is just to pop and attack. So, I mean, I think that's it's definitely really coming up in the meta. I think there's more and more people playing Serpent Knight, more and more people experimenting with it. And I see a lot of people, like I said, playing Dragon's Rebirth. It's a really good trap card. And I think a lot of people will switch up these the 3 effect monsters. There's not like a hard and fast rule for which ones you need to play, but I think out of all of them, that's probably the one or the 3 that I would recommend. It's just there's really not many other ones that achieve the effect of just like keeping the monster on the board, like having around 2,000 defense for both Black Stego and Command Knight. Is just really good, because if you set that first turn, most likely your opponent's not going to get over it, and then you can just kind of go off with your combo. But I mean, if you were to play something else like Yomi Ship or Man-Eater Bug or something like that, where it has like a cool flip effect. Well, like that's not going to be ideal for this deck because you're basically going to be down a monster, and then let's say in your hand you draw into a Serpent Knight and like a Tribute Doll, and you don't have any other monsters, then like you just can't summon that Serpent Knight. So you really want to keep monsters on the field and then be able to just slow down your opponent. So I think this is probably the best build. And then in terms of side deck, you could probably look at cards like RFI, Kunai, depending on again like your local scene. Nightbeam's always a good one, and then just depending on what you really think is just prevalent at your locals, maybe like a D-Spell or maybe a Magic Jammer, depending on if you really are worried about certain decks, like a certain Blue Eyes or a certain Relinquish that isn't necessarily top tier anymore, I would say, but is like still prevalent in a lot of locals because, you know, there's only so many decks. So, but yeah, I really appreciate you guys watching, and I hope to see you on the next one. Let me know your thoughts about this deck, and yeah, subscribe for more.